This segment brought to you by Kansas Corn. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Schroyer, and with us we have Dr. Jeff Whitworth, our extension entomologist. And Jeff, this time of year, you're probably getting calls about critters feeding on the pods.
Yes, the soybean pod feeding is just getting started throughout Kansas, and that's something we always worry about.
That's an August, September thing, right?
It usually is, yes, and maybe even a little bit later with the double crop soybeans we have. It just depends on the growing season. But that's where the insects are feeding right on the marketable product.
Right.
And that's where you can lose yield very quickly, as opposed to the defoliation, which is not as
severe,
in my opinion. Yeah, not as dramatic. But anyway, the pod feeding, the two main pod feeders that we worry about throughout the state year after year is a beanleaf beetle adult, which feeds on the pod itself, versus the corn earworm larvae, or sometimes it's called the soybean podworm, or the sorghum headworm, or the cotton bollworm. Same species.
Same critter.
Same critter. They'll feed in all of those different crops, but it will feed on the seed or the bean within the pod. So if you're out looking at your field and you're trying to determine which is causing a problem, and that's important, that you determine which it is. If it's just scraping and the pod on the outside of the pod and doesn't go right for the seed, that's a beanleaf beetle adult. You're probably not going to see the insect itself feeding on it, but that's indicative of the beanleaf beetle adult. If there's one hole right where the seed is, or two or three, that's probably the corn earworm larvae. Now, the reason that's important is because the corn earworm larval stage is the only stage that's going to feed on the seeds within the pods. And that stage is only going to last like 2 weeks. The beanleaf beetle adult, that's going to feed on the pods, not the seed, but the pod itself. But they're going to be out here feeding until they overwinter, or until the pods turn yellow and they're too hard and too dry for them to get any sustenance out of. So if you're out checking to see which is which, if you find a lot of seed feeding and you go out with your sweep net and you can't find any larvae, corn earworm larvae or soybean podworms, whichever you want to call them, that probably means they're pupating. And that's probably old damage. So you don't want to treat, okay? Because after that, it's going to be 2 to 3 more weeks before another generation comes on. So it's all about timing when you treat for insecticide.
But you do have, you said for about 10 to 12 days they're pretty active, but then you've got another generation, so you could actually have 2 or 3 weeks.
Yes, that's what I say. Those larvae will pupate, and it'll be a couple of weeks while they pupate and lay eggs before they larvae start feeding again. So the later the beans are planted, the more you have to worry about later in the season for corn earworms feeding on the seed within the pod.
How about control?
You make sure you use plenty of carrier. They're easy to kill because they're up in the top part of the canopy, but you want to make sure you use enough carrier to penetrate the canopy to get to where the insects are. These are all contact insecticides.
Right.
So they have to contact the insect.
Jeff, appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hello friends, I'm Ernie Rodina.
And I'm Dawn Dawson with the Better Horses Radio Show.
For over 9 years, we've been bringing the Better Horses Radio Show to markets all across the Midwest. We talk about God, lots about horses.
We talk about cows, we talk about horse health, we talk to top trainers, and we even talk about Roy Rogers.
We are having a blast with Better Horses Radio Show and would love to take it to a market near you.
So visit our website at betterhorsesradio.com and let us or your local radio station know you'd like to hear it in your area.
The Better Horses Radio Show is unbelievable.